Hey everyone, and welcome to 15 Minutes to Merge. I'm April Edwards, and I have one of my favorite guests with me this week, Floor Drees. Welcome,
Thank you.
Floor.
But you say that to all of your guests.
No, I said you're my favorite. So, for people who might not know who you are, which is a shame, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Floor. I'm based in the Netherlands. Currently, I work at Aiven, which is a open source data tools managed service extravaganza. Before that, I used to work in mostly developer relations type roles at Grafana Labs, and before that, Microsoft. And before that, a whole bunch of open source dev tooling startups. Yeah, and I am also an organizer of a bunch of technical conferences, including DevOps Days, and also Community Over Code in Bratislava, Slovakia next year in June. So that's exciting too.
Is that a
A
hint?
little bit.
Hint,
It's a
hint.
little bit
We
of a
all need to
hint.
be there.
You should definitely go there.
Okay, I'll be there. Well, I'll make sure we bring everyone that's
Very
watching
good.
as well. Right, we want to actually talk about some GitHub stuff. You guys at Aiven have done some cool stuff with your repositories and your organizational configuration. So go ahead and tell us what you guys did, and take
Yeah,
it away.
excellent. So we were at a situation at the beginning of 2023 where we had a massive organization on GitHub with repositories that were both forks from the open source projects that we offer as a managed service. So that includes Postgres, MySQL, well, not Postgres, well, because Postgres famously lives outside of GitHub, but definitely a sort of like a private copy of the Postgres code base. But then Kafka, Cassandra, all of these projects. Then we had projects that were either projects that we had open sourced or that we had assumed some sort of maintenance role over. And then there were a bunch of repositories that had sample code in them or code for tutorials or demos that we would run with our customers. And frankly, everything in between. And it was just, it was a lot. And because it was all in one organization, it meant that most of the policies would also count for all of these different repositories, and that wasn't always very appropriate or very helpful. So we definitely ran into situations where we quickly wanted to upload a demo for a conference that would take place later that week, and just to try and get that repository approved and ready for to show to the audience at a conference. That took a while, and it was just that was just not appropriate. And so we figured that also because we wanted to make sure that some of our open source projects were more accessible for external contributors, that we would split out our what we lovingly refer to as our mono organization. We wanted to split that out in multiple organizations fit for different type of repositories and projects.
And that makes a ton of sense. We have a lot of our customers consuming in the open source space and in the managed service space, and figuring out how to manage that from compliance standards, permissions. And it does. The world becomes a really messy place when everything's in one mono org. So that's really cool. So walk us through your journey. Talk to us about how that transpired, some learnings you had, and then what it looks like today.
Yeah, so we started with like how you start every project to take over the world. We started a spreadsheet to list all of the repositories that we had in the mono organization at that point in time, and then split those out into sort of three different buckets. One that was specifically geared towards making sure that we have a mirror of all of the projects that we contribute to, because we have a sort of like contribute to upstream first type of policy, and also have all of our non-public code in the one organization, then have a separate one that was specifically for geared towards getting external contributors to some of our projects that we have open sourced or that we have under our maintenance. And then a third one that was specifically for our solution architects and DevRel team. So that's where all of the sample code and the demo projects would go. We came up with a sort of like a time to migration, and figured out if all of these repositories even had owners, and if those owners were still employed by Aiven, or if we would need to find new maintainers for some of these projects. And we set ourselves a deadline, and before all of those repositories would need to be migrated to the new organizations, followed up on this process. And what was really incredibly beneficial from this move as well is that we connected everything to our authentication platform from the get-go. That means that everyone that now joins Aiven will be assigned to the right teams and have the right access to these projects right away. But also, when someone would leave the company, we had a good opportunity to reach out and see if they would still continue to own these projects, or if they would be ready to hand over. I think maybe another thing that is interesting is that before, in the mono organization, we had a couple of these sample code type of projects, and just because they lived among all of the serious repositories, it seemed like they were production ready, and it sort of signaled that these were under active development, which might not always be the case. And so definitely by putting those in their separate organization, we could also manage expectations around active development and responsiveness better as well.
That's really good. I think in the open source community as well, when we're contributing to projects, it's good to know like people still are responding. Like it's something we've talked about in engineering. Like we put a project out there. How do we manage the credentials, access? How do we get people access? Those are always hard things, but it sounds like you guys have done it really well and done it pretty efficiently.
Thank you. I like to think so too.
You should say yes.
Of course.
Amazing.
I mean,
so what do your orgs look like today?
So I can show you real quick the 3 different organizations that we have. So we have the sort of OG organization that is Aiven. We've added, by the way, for all of these organizations, we've added an organization-wide README, which I think is an excellent feature of GitHub as well. And we've pinned a couple of the repositories that we wanted to highlight that really also signal what this organization is all about. And then we also talk about the other GitHub organizations that we have. So for instance, that's the Aiven Open organization that is for all of the projects that are made and maintained by Aiven, and specifically by our open source program office, or our OSPO. Again, an organization-wide README, and then a couple of the repositories that really signal what you can find here. That sometimes projects like Claw that we have acquired and have now assumed a maintenance role over. But it's also some of our like early on projects in the Postgres space, because if you didn't know, Aiven was started by a couple of Postgres developers that just got sort of tired of creating the same solutions for customers over and over again, and so they build a business around it. And then there's Aiven Labs, and Aiven Labs is really for, again, our solution architects, our developer relations team. It says also experimental, very much not production ready, which is an apt description. These are all of the sample codes and the small projects. That is not to say, by the way, because sometimes we'll create a project in Aiven Labs that will then sort of grow up to be an actual real project that we might want to migrate to one of the other organizations. So we had a demo project that one of my colleagues in the DevRel team started, the metadata parser, and we actually graduated that almost to the Aiven Open organization once it started seeing a lot of external contributions.
Awesome. And I think that's really important in the open source community to actually see projects go from incubation into ready for human consumption
Yeah.
form, right? I think that's very cool. How do you all find moving those repositories across the different orgs?
It was pretty seamless once we figured out who were the owners for these repositories. I think like many of those the sort of like things that you run into, the challenges that you run into with any such projects are of a human nature, and so trying to get people to move their projects, which might sometimes in some cases break their workflow. So even if it works in their favor in terms of developer experience in the long run, it is still fairly hard to get people to change their habits. And so that was definitely those were definitely the most interesting challenges. And so making sure that we repeat the message of why we're even doing this in the first place, and make sure that we repeat that message in the right channels with the right people. That I think that costs most of the time, because everything else was fairly straightforward. I think maybe another thing that I want to call out that was just really interesting with this change as well is that we could also make sure that we enable integrations for some of the projects more appropriately for the different organizations. So definitely for the Aiven open organization, it was paramount that we have code spaces enabled so that anyone could just jump in and get started with contributing to these projects. And that has helped us a lot during Hacktoberfest this year as well. So some of our projects in the Aiven Open organization saw a lot of contributions, which is wonderful. And another thing is that because we have the upstream first sort of methodology, is that we could add issue templates for the projects, the forks that we have in the Aiven organization for Kafka or Cassandra, and make sure that people know that this is not the place to create issues because you want to see some kind of features, or you notice some kind of bugs in the code, but that those requests should really go to the upstream projects instead.
No, that's really good. I think it's it's really good how you all have documented it, but scaled that as well across the different different repos, the different types of projects. That's really important. So it sounds like you guys have been really successful and been really busy as well.
Yeah.
So
Yes, and then I think the last bit was making sure that from now on, people will create the things in the right place in the first place. And so hopefully some of the documentation that we've done and also the documentation or the guidance that they can see on the organization's readmes too will make sure that people know what to create where. And I guess repetition too. But we've been having to do very little course correction, so that's really good.
I think that's really good kind of measure of improvement for you all in moving to these multiple orgs, right? And getting all the documentation. And documentation does solve lots of problems and putting in some guardrails, right? To funnel people
Yeah,
into the right
absolutely.
place. So awesome. Well, thank you, Fleur, so much for sharing that with us. Sounds like a really successful project for you all. It's awesome that you all are hosting on GitHub as well. I mean, I'm a little biased, but any other parting words you want to leave anyone with today?
So I think like for this, it's very hard to plan for something like this very early on in your journey if you're just getting started. But definitely thinking about an authentication, how you want to centralize authentication for your work, the work that your colleagues do on GitHub is a very interesting challenge, and I would have advised everyone to think about that really early on, not necessarily when you have a whole flurry of people working on projects and you're not entirely sure if things are well maintained. So I think authentication strategy is something that everyone can think about no matter where they are in their journey of managing a bunch of open source projects on GitHub.
Awesome. Thank you, Fleur,
Cool.
so much. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in today. And we'll see you all next time on 15 Minutes to Merge.